Welcome to Faith and Politics, a show dedicated to discussing issues surrounding the intersection of church, state, and politics, and an examination of whether you are allowing your faith to shape your politics or are you allowing your politics to shape your faith. In other words, what do you do when God and government come face to face? I'm your host, Orland Johnson, and let me introduce you to our roundtable of regularly scheduled panelists. Our four panelists we have today, first we have Bettina Krause, who's the editor of Liberty Magazine. We have Carmela Monk Crawford, the editor of Message Magazine. We have Melissa Reed, who is the Washington liaison for the North American division of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And we also have Jennifer Woods, who's the director of government affairs for the World Seventh-day Adventist Church. Ladies, thank you for being with us here today and welcome to Faith and Politics. We're going to jump right into segment one. You know, one of the things that's been going on in our society is the civil discourse that we are seeing, and the polarization that's taking place is getting to the point where it's getting so out of control. Even religious groups are attacking other religious groups. And we're getting to a point now where sometimes the groups that are actually going after one religious body comes from another religious body. This sounds like it's gone too far. And, you know, Carmela, I want you to tell me what your thoughts are on this. Is this civil discourse and this polarization taking place going to be something that we're going to see more of, or do we really need to be fighting to get back to a little bit more civility?
Well, Orland, thank you for coming to me for the first word in pessimism. That horse has left the gate and is being tracked and has been tracked at least for, in a serious way, even before 9/11. But we're talking going back to 2008. There's a book called The Big Sort that I heard a news story about even just today, where people are increasingly insular, increasingly with the people that they know and the people who believe like them and the people who want to see government the way they see it. And so there is a continued ebb or a loss of our collective thoughts of collective destiny. So yeah, that horse has left the gate.
So it sounds like we're someplace, and Melissa, let me get your thoughts on this. You either got to be liberal, you got to be conservative. If you're not one of those two, you've got no camp to be in. God forbid if you're moderate, then you basically have to leave the room. I mean, how do we try to get our discourse, in particular from a religious community, to be a lot better? And how can this polarization continue and we want to consider ourselves to be lovers of our fellow man?
Sure. Well, you made the reference of, one religious group disparaging another, but we see this in our own churches. One church member of the same tradition, not talking or unfriending on social media, the person that they used to share a hymnal with, because again of their, disparate political positions. And I mean, that's just not who we're called to be. Absolutely. As human beings, certainly as image bearers. And so I think, honestly, I see this as a real opportunity. Yeah, we're in a terrible place. I completely agree with Carmela as far as things go. But I am a little bit more optimistic because I see there's an opportunity, particularly as we call ourselves Christians, to more accurately reflect the character of Christ rather than having what's going on out in quote unquote the world come in and influence, who we are. We want to have our faith shape, how we pretend to be. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to reiterate, not a great space where we're at, but I feel like it's a real opportunity for us.
Yeah. So Jennifer, I go places and people tell me what kind of church I'm going to. They would normally say, oh, Orland, you're going here. That's a conservative church, or their ministry is going to be like this. And the mere fact that someone has to describe to me what kind of church it is even before I get there, almost as a way of protecting me from myself. I mean, is this where we are today? Help me understand what's going on.
I see a real issue with the fact that we're so tied to labels, right? Again, it's conservative or liberal, and those words have so much behind them. So if you're conservative, you must believe the following list of things. And if you're liberal, you must believe the following list of things. And there's no room for nuance, for people to be individuals. And also when we start to label individuals or even, certain churches as being more conservative than others, we take away some of we take away the fact that we're supposed to be Christians first. We're supposed to be reflections of God, right? And Christ and his love. And I love what Melissa said, image bearers, right? And instead we place these political labels before even love for Christ. Our churches, I think we should never be describing a church as, oh, that's the conservative church. We should be describing churches as, oh, that's the loving church. Wow. That's the church where you're going to feel welcome. That's the church where you're not going to be judged just because you have some differences of belief or opinion than some of the people that are here. Because we're leaving that stuff outside. We're going to focus on reflecting Christ and his love and serving others based on that.
But you know something, Bettina, for a long time, in America, we talk about the most segregated moment in our country is usually during the hours of worship. And those hours of worship on the weekend, we seem to be more comfortable only being with people who are just like us. Do we have to change that narrative in order for this polarization to stop? Or is this something that there may be another way that we may be able to get there? What are your thoughts on that? This helped me understand.
Well, if I could help you understand that, Orlin, I'd give up my day job, write a book and become rich. That's not going to happen because that question is pretty much unanswerable. We are living in a moment in time. We're fond of saying, this is the worst something has ever been. This is what we think. But, sociologists are tracking this polarization, this sense of little identity groups clumping together in different spaces. They're tracking this and they're finding that for the first time ever, people's hate for the out group or for their political opponents, their hate for their opponents is greater than their love or their sense of loyalty to their own group. So what you're having is sort of this rise in angst, in anger, in these destructive emotions which seem to be swirling around our political space at the moment. What has worried me the most, I think, in recent years is to see church groups act like political interest groups. And that is, they look inward and their goal is to protect their interests. That's what an interest group does. So instead of being the light of the world, they're looking inward. And I think that is when we're part of the problem. If we are looking primarily to preserve our own interests, whether that's in relation to another congregation somewhere else or in relation to the broader community, when we're only interested in that, that's when we should be afraid.
But Carmela, most religious groups, their primary focus is really trying to create an environment to allow those religious principles and ideas to move on from generation to generation. So it seems like it's insular in nature. And how can you get away from doing something different? Because it almost would feel like you're promoting someone else as opposed to promoting what you might believe. Am I missing something here, or is it possible to do something different?
I think we're all missing something here. How we do something different, like Bettina says, if we could figure that out, we wouldn't even be having to have this conversation anymore. Right. If we could turn around and figure out what do we say to the next generation, if we could figure out how to tease out our faith from the din of noise of politics and discrimination and oppression and all that sort of thing, if we could just tease out those principles, we'd be doing something well. I don't know. I think, for me, a lot of the conversation really does come down to how so many of us are equating political positions as items or points of faith.
Right.
And so now we don't know what to do, because now if I back off of a social position, I am somehow backing off of a part of my faith.
Yeah.
And so this is really hard. And I think if there ever was a way that we could morph into a new era of sharing our faith, that would be the place to do it. I'm
going to have to give you the last word on that, Carmela, but I think you hit it right on point. The fact of the matter is, if we can change our discourse in some way, you might actually be able to draw more men and women towards your religious beliefs of what someone may be looking to do. But let's move on to our next segment. This is an interesting issue here. We are starting to see now that your conversation in the public sphere, even at work, even when you're asked to be in the midst of a discussion, can sometimes still lead to a traumatic situation. We have a matter with a lady who was working at Alaska Airlines. The organization sent out some public messaging saying that they were going to be in support of some pieces of legislation that were going to be supporting the LGBTQ community. And she responded in this particular forum by saying, do you really think that we can actually legislate morality? And she got fired. You know, I don't even understand what could be possibly happening where the moment you want to speak on something that you end up losing your job. You know, Bettina, can you just help me to understand what's going on in this set of circumstances, and does this make sense?
You know, I think it comes as a great surprise to many people that the First Amendment does not protect your speech in the workplace, unless you work, of course, for the federal government, because the First Amendment is concerned with restraining government action that would impinge upon your free speech rights. A private employer is a private actor. And so you do not have those clear speech rights, constitutionally speaking, in the workplace. However, I mean, this case was really interesting, Orlin, because it was actually an intra-office forum that the employer opened up and actually invited employees to contribute. So it was an invitation to speak. I'm not sure how that will bear upon the case moving forward, but to me, it is indicative more of a cultural issue, a social issue that we're facing, which is people are more comfortable these days in censoring uncomfortable speech. And that is becoming a trend, I think, that is sort of undermining our whole American culture that fiercely protects this concept of free speech.
You know, Jennifer, I got to ask you, it almost felt as though Alaska Airlines was setting a trap. They say we have this open forum for you to say what you feel, and then you say what you feel, and now it's contrary to what leadership may be thinking, and they dismiss you. Where does Alaska Airlines need to be checked on this particular situation from your perspective?
Well, that's what I found troubling when I was reading about this issue. It was like, wait, you ask for people to share their thoughts, and then people let down their guard and share their thoughts, and then they're fired. So I think all that they have done is now told people, don't actually share your thoughts unless they are in line with the organization's thoughts. Anything outside of that, you will lose your job. So I'm not sure what they hoped to gain by taking this drastic step because someone shared a thought that was not in line with the company line.
But Carmela, it's a private organization, right? They get the ability to set and do whatever they feel like doing. They don't like what you said. They think it's contrary to what the leadership believes. You lose your job. Isn't that part of the American way? Or is there something else going on here?
Yeah, it's a part of the American way. You always have the right to, you could always speak up your mind. And if you're taking a principled stand, you recognize that you will or often will pay a price for it. The price that our companies or organizations pay come at the social level and come, we vote with our feet and we vote with our dollars. If we like what Alaska Airlines, I don't know the last time I ever flew Alaska Airlines, but maybe this is something that we have to think about. But, that's the American way, unfortunately. I don't know why we feel so secure in some of these things. It's when you run counter to what the people who have the power, that's when you fall into a trap, as you have said. And so you have, that doesn't make it right. I'm just saying that is not uncommon, is it?
Well, Melissa, I got to ask you, you're somebody who's down in Washington, you're seeing a lot of legislation on a regular basis. Is there a way to fix something like this? Is there a way that possibly there can be something to cause organizations like this to not say, hey, tell me what you think, and as soon as you expose what you think, oh, by the way, you lose your job?
Yeah, well, I agree with what Carmela said as far as this is really sort of a trend that we're seeing, and what we should anticipate seeing more and more. I mean, I'm still of the mindset that I have a tough time thinking that for-profit corporations should have a societal voice. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still having that hurdle, but we are now at a place where the organization is speaking and promoting a particular value. And then when one of their employees says something counter, they're penalized. And so, I mean, it's just really tough to me to see sort of the appropriateness of this. Again, you know, you guys use the word trap, and I feel like, yeah, you're certainly not going to encourage discourse in the future on your communication method.
Well, you know, the funny thing about this is I wondered if they actually really wanted anybody to say anything. Or was this just for the group that would be in agreement to come forward and say something? And Bettina, I'm wondering, is this a way that we can kind of look at an opportunity to remind individuals that you also should be free to share your beliefs? It doesn't mean that it's impinging upon you doing your job in any way, but if we're all going to be individuals, we should be able to do something about that. Am I missing something, Bettina?
Absolutely not, Orlin. I agree with you 100%. We have a lot of work to do to rebuild a culture of free speech where we are comfortable with free speech. Because look, let's face it, we're talking about it here on the progressive end of the spectrum, where that's where the censorship is coming from. But we see it just as much on the conservative end of the spectrum. I mean, you look at the critical race theory legislation that has been introduced into 22 states legislatures at last count, which many of these pieces of legislation are going far beyond merely trying to regulate K through 12 curriculum. They're trying to suppress the discussion of CRT in a meaningful way in other forums. This is the culture that we now occupy, where both progressives and conservatives are comfortable with censorship when it lines up with their particular perspectives. So, Orlin, you are absolutely right. We have a lot of work to do to help people realize that when they try to chip away at someone's freedom of speech, they're also chipping away at things like religious freedom, which relies on free speech in order to be viable.
I'm going to have to make that the last word on this topic, but we see some of the struggles that we're dealing with, and it kind of leads into segment 3. In segment 3, we're talking about the fact that we have individuals who are incarcerated. And we have a particular matter where someone was incarcerated in a prison in Alabama, and we have seen this happen in other locations as well. But that individual was on death row. He was going to be executed. He asked that he could have a Muslim leadership representative come in to be part of his final moments. And he was told, no, we only have this, and this is what you have to deal with. The courts actually went and took a look at that particular situation. Melissa, can you give us a little bit of background on this and this whole idea of, do you not have rights even when you're being executed in the penal system?
Sure. We've talked before in conversation with each other about this sort of patchwork of rights, and it does differ as far as which state you're being executed in, unless, of course, it's a federal execution, as to what rights you have in the execution chamber. Now, the case that Orlin was mentioning, the way that the Supreme Court ended up ruling was they were saying it was insufficient time. He had asked too late, which, again, many of us who pay attention to religious freedom issues, really, that left us scratching our heads quite a bit. And then we had the situation that followed right after, which was even more confusing for us, was that in a different state, an individual asked for a representative from his faith tradition, and was allowed that, or he was told no by the execution by the state, and the Supreme Court said that was inappropriate. Now, the little PS on that one, which is interesting, is that so the state program, once they'd lost the case, they just shut down the chaplaincy program or having that faith person there to begin. That's what we see sometimes. Now, a couple of years later, it was reintroduced in that state. And that's kind of, I think, where we're seeing courts stand is recognizing that, yes, it should be the right of someone facing execution to have someone of their faith tradition, if they choose, with them in the chamber.
You know, Bettina, I don't know where we are as a society, but if I have the ability to pick what my last meal is going to be, somehow I don't have the ability to pick who the individual should be from my faith that's there. You know, has this gone too far? Or should it be a situation where you are someone who's in prison? There are limited rights you're going to have. We have somebody here who's of some religious faith. Why isn't that sufficient?
You know, it's so interesting, Orlin, because this issue has been kicking around for so many years. And as you've said, you know, the Supreme Court has come down in different ways in different situations. You know, it seems to me that we may be getting more clarity soon with a case called Ramirez versus Collier, which there's been oral argument. We're waiting for the decision to come down. It should be very soon. And in that case, it was very interesting during the oral argument because you had some justices sort of airing their concerns about giving more religious freedom in the execution chamber. So you had one saying, you know, well, how do we determine the sincerity of this request? Is it just a stalling tactic? And another asked, you know, well, how do we put a limit then? You know, where is the limit on these religious requests? And what they were referencing was this whole balancing dynamic that every Department of Corrections has to make, which is accommodating the religious rights of the inmates who they are charged with, and also maintaining security. How do you make that balance? Well, you know, I'm hoping what the Supreme Court will find is that when you are in an institutional setting where the government controls every aspect of your life, that the responsibility it has toward your civil rights is that much greater in those situations. So we may soon see a bit more clarity in this area. I'm hoping so.
You know, Carmela, but how do I juxtapose this situation against, for example, being in the military, where you have chaplains that are of a limited number of faiths, who are responsible for leading out in some type of religious worship experience, regardless of what your particular religious or denominational beliefs might be? They have figured out how to make that work there. Shouldn't this be very similar here, that, you know, we do have somebody with a religious belief, or am I missing something here? What are your thoughts on that?
I started to say, I don't know. I've never been on death row yet, so I don't know how important that would be for me. But truly, yeah, you're right. You know, our own Barry Black has often talked about what it is like to be in a chamber where you have people of all different faiths, and they study together and they pray, they work. But this is different. Come on, you're right. If you can ask for your last meal with onion rings and Dijon mustard, you can at least have someone take you into your next transition along the faith lines that you're aware of. So I think it's important, but I do think there's a distinction between what that is and this very specific end of life, last wish kind of scenario. There should be somebody there for them.
You know, Jennifer, I got to ask you this. The question was begged that, is this turning into a situation where even justices may be allowing their own personal biases to come into play, where someone who may be a Buddhist might be able to have someone coming in, but if somebody who is Muslim, they may not be comfortable with an imam coming in? Are we finding a set of circumstances where maybe it's a little bit more of, you know, politics shaping their faith, even in the courtrooms?
You know, and that's my big concern, is that when we had these two Supreme Court decisions that came, you know, months apart, with two different outcomes, and you look and you say, oh, wait, what's the difference here? Is it because one's asking for an imam and one's asking for a spiritual advisor of a Buddhist faith? Is it because we're favoring certain religions over others? And I think that the key is just to have some consistency, so it doesn't even appear that we're favoring one religion or one faith tradition over another, especially when we're dealing with people with these ends of life requests that they're making.
Well, I'm going to have to let it be the last word there on that, but it is amazing to see that whether or not we can actually separate religious beliefs, even in a courtroom, is getting to be very difficult to figure out. Well, we're going to get to our final segment where you get a chance to tell me something I don't know. And I'm going to start with you, Melissa. Melissa, tell me something I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm going to predict that things are going to get worse before they get better as far as free speech goes, not so much being monitored or restricted by the government, but again, us doing it to ourselves, requiring the same, everyone to have the same opinion on things or there be social consequences.
Wow. Jennifer, tell me something I don't know.
Sure. So I don't know if you knew that last year, 2021, we had the fewest number of executions since 1988. And I'm hoping that this is a trend that continues.
Wow. Bettina, tell me something I don't know.
I'm going with free speech as well. I think that is going to be the new frontier in religious freedom issues. And that's the area that we'll be keeping our eye on going forward.
Carmela, tell me something I don't know.
On the same line, free speech, we have to remember, and what I would like to advocate for is the ability to see the pattern between the corruption or the ability of that and things that we hold so close to the vest. It's coming, it's inching, it's getting closer and closer, whether it's critical race theory, whether it's free speech about what different issues, we're getting closer and closer.
Wow, we're going to have to let that be the last word, but thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us here on Faith and Politics. Well, we had a great show today and tackled some very tough issues, and we look forward to getting to a point where you know that if it's about God and government, it's faith and politics. See you next time.